Cool.
All right. It is May 8th, Friday, May 8th, actually. I got a chance to talk to somebody I've been wanting to talk to for a minute. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it in person, but it's still a good opportunity to do so. He is really the head honcho at the most important arts center in all of Atlanta. His name is Doug Shipman. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. I'm trying to read and do two things at once. And so I'm here talking to Doug, and we're going to be talking about a couple of things today, one of which is what does it mean to be an arts organization in the time of COVID-19, and then also what does it mean for the arts going forward when a lot of the arts are patron-based businesses. So without further ado, I'm going to let Doug introduce himself, and then we'll get into it from there.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I'm Doug Shipman. I'm the president and CEO of the Woodruff Arts Center, which includes the Alliance Theater, the High Museum of Art, and the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I have been in Atlanta a long time. I was former CEO of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, so I've been around the sort of nonprofit space, and I am very excited to be here and very concerned about COVID.
Right. And so before we get into the COVID aspect of it, can you explain to people what you did at the Center for Civil and Human Rights, and then how did you get at the High Museum? Oh, the Woodruff Arts Center. I'm so used to saying the High Museum, but the Woodruff Arts Center as a whole.
Sure. So when Shirley Franklin was mayor, I did a 10-week pro bono that turned into 10 years of leading the effort to build the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. So from the very beginning, the acquisition of the King Papers all the way through the opening of the center in 2014. I left in 2015 after all of that time and actually went back to the private sector for a bit. And then I got recruited to oversee the Woodruff Arts Center. And it's a little bit like being a university president. There's a head of the high, there's a head of the symphony, a head of the theater, and they really do the art. And I try to make sure that everybody has everything they need in order to do the great work they do.
Right. And one of the things that's been a hallmark of your tenure so far over the Woodruff is it seems to be in the diversification of the types of art that is presented there. And you guys have gotten a lot of good press about that. Can you explain to people what that strategy was and how that's worked out?
Sure. So the Woodruff Arts Center is 50 years old, and for a long time, like a lot of big institutions, it was not as representative of the city racially or sort of from the broad sense of art, sort of perspectives and voices. And really, even prior to my arrival a little over 3 years ago, there were really concerted efforts to both expand the types of artists and the diversification of the artists that were being presented along racial lines, gender lines, sexuality lines, and also just perspectives, and also access to make it easier for patrons who are from various backgrounds and also various knowledge about art. You shouldn't just be an art expert or a theater expert to be able to come and enjoy something and see yourself represented. So there's really been a concerted effort on all those fronts, from exhibitions to programs to access to going out into the community more. And I think it really, we've seen it in the numbers. One interesting statistic, the High Museum about 4 years ago, on a daily basis, 80% of its visitation was white, 20%, less than 20% were people of color, and now it's 50-50. And that's actually leading the country. The average for an art museum is 90% white, 10% people of color. I mean, it's unconscionable. So we're really proud of the fact that we've invested a lot. We've changed not only the art, but also we've recruited more docents of color. We've done a lot different marketing. And so all of that has culminated in a much different kind of experience of what's programmed and also who's there.
Right. In the case of Woodruff Arts Center, I know for myself and a lot of people, when we either go for like a new museum at the High or we go in for like a special performance at the Woodruff. Can you explain to people how many things you guys actually do at the facility?
There are literally thousands of events a year. On any one night, you may have a small theater show on one stage, a huge theater show on another, a special exhibition opening, and an event at the High. Something in the Rich Auditorium that could be the Atlanta Jazz Festival having a special event, and the symphony or a commercial artist playing on Symphony Hall stage. I mean, so when the place is really going, you may have 5 or 6 events and 4,000 or 5,000 people on the campus at the same time. But almost even during the day, you'll have rehearsals, you'll have new works, you'll have children's programs, you'll have all kinds of activity happening every day of the year. because it really is a huge art center. It's the third largest art center in the country, actually, behind only Lincoln Center in New York and the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C.
Okay, did not know that. And one of the things I want to ask in particular is that you and the arts organization in particular seems to have more of a, in addition to being more diverse, it seems like there's more of a focus on bringing families into the art center of all types. I know you guys do the free Sundays, and can you explain to people what that is and also your initiative on families?
So family initiative really is a couple of fold. One, we spend an enormous amount of time and energy on education, and that's in schools, obviously, and field trips, but we also, a few years ago, really believed that educating families and bringing families together was another part of that effort. And two, if you care about diversity, then you should care about families, because families and younger people are more diverse as just a demographic than older folks. So you're actually getting both sides of that. By focusing on families, you're actually increasing your diversity and your outreach. So the family orientation, though, is interesting because we wanted to make sure the quality of family programs was just as high as the quality of adult programs. And so, for instance, you may have a children's show that the Alliance produces as part of their series that is done by a Broadway director and a Tony Award-winning designer, but it's aimed at 18-month-olds or 3-year-olds. So there's a whole series called Theater for the Very Young. There's a whole series called Music for the Very Young. At the High, there's something called Toddler Thursdays, where literally toddlers take over the main atrium of the museum. And then, like you mentioned, every second Sunday of the month, the High is completely free, and there are special activities at both the Symphony and the Alliance Theater. And so every second Sunday, we can have anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 families on the campus with special things happening just for them. And, you know, it really is one of those things. It's so gratifying to see a grandparent, a parent, and a child all experiencing art or a performance together. I mean, it really is it's a special thing that we love to do.
And one of the things I want to ask about that is that it seems as if pre-COVID-19, like the Woodruff Arts Center had really not only changed itself, but it seemed like it became like a linchpin for success and what the art space can look like. Did you ever get any other requests from other arts organizations or things like that on what you guys are doing right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have been over the last couple of years really exporting this knowledge, because this isn't something that we should be competitive about. It's something we should share. So that's everything from presentations at national conferences. There's a docent conference, the docents of the High, which are kind of independent volunteers. They presented on what it meant to diversify audiences and diversify docents. Theater for the Very Young shows have traveled nationally to other places. We have, for instance, we do a lot of new work, and a lot of that is from diverse voices. A lot of that new work is shared for free with other theaters so that they can put writers of color or stories about people of color on their stages and not have to pay for it. As well as here in the city, you know, we've been a part of a lot of different consortiums, and thankfully we have great relationships with a lot of the arts organizations. There's something called the Audience Building Roundtable that the Blank Foundation has sponsored. It's how do you build audiences? And folks across the Woodruff have made a lot of different presentations on our strategies for diversifying audiences so that other organizations can use those same strategies. Look, at the end of the day, Atlanta is a very diverse place. That's the advantage we have, right? So it's not like, you know, Austin or Topeka, Kansas, where you only have a limited amount of diversity. We have a ton of diversity. So the audience is there. It's just how do you reach them, and how do you make it so that they want to spend their Sunday at the Woodruff Arts Center instead of their Sunday doing something else that's fun in the city.
Okay, and one of the things I want to ask you is if you could just give somebody one tip on how to make their arts organization more attractive to potential like audience members, what would you give them?
So, I mean, I think it fundamentally starts with the content, right? People react to things that they're interested in. And so, for instance, one of the shows that just happened before we closed was a show, an exhibition of Virgil Abloh's work. Virgil Abloh, of course, streetwear designer / architect / artist / you know, he's sort of this polymath artist. And there was a retrospective put together at the Chicago Museum, and we brought it here. And having Virgil Abloh as, you know, this special exhibition then creates all this other programming that you can create. And Virgil Abloh is interesting because he's very attractive to young people. He's very attractive to people in fashion. He's very attractive to African-American folks. He's very attractive to anybody who follows hip hop because of his connection with that world. So all of a sudden you've got multiple audiences that are interested, and you can build programs around that. So the content, I think, drives it. But the second is, in order to make it interesting, you've got to market it in a way so that the audience you're going for understands it. So that's outlets, that's the kind of marketing messages, that's the kinds of images that you use. I mean, it really should, the marketing should say, this is the kind of experience you're going to have, and then you should deliver on that. But fundamentally, you change the content, you're going to change the audience.
I will give you guys that, because it wasn't even the Virgil exhibit itself. I was more impressed with just the response of people I know who had never been to the art museum in their lifetime in Atlanta, who all of a sudden were interested in going to see the Virgil exhibit. And I wanted to know, was that an actual success for you guys? On my end, it felt like a success, but I don't know.
Huge success. It was a huge success on a couple of things. One, it actually spawned some really interesting collaborations. So Virgil was working with some local designers doing bespoke wear items and bags and such just for that show. So it was cool because there were some collaborations between Atlanta-based designers and artists and Virgil that probably wouldn't have happened without it. On a broader sense, I mean, I'll give you one anecdote. I was walking through there one day and a whole group of, I don't know, 14-year-olds were visiting. And it was like they were visiting a gold mine. I mean, they just thought it was amazing, and their eyes were this big, and they were taking it in, they were filming themselves, and they were talking about it. And, you know, that's the spark that some of those 14-year-olds will come back for something they don't know as much about, or they may come back for something that's a little bit of a stretch for them. That's planting the seeds. And so it was very successful on the, you know, how many people came and all of that, but it was also very successful, just to your point. It brought new people in who had never been there before. And that's the spark to help them to keep coming back.
Right, and there's two other things I want to bring up that are related to the High and their exhibits I thought was interesting, because I just didn't expect this move from the High, besides Virgil. The other one was, it was maybe 2 years, correct me if I'm wrong, you had a Winnie the Pooh exhibit, and it kind of was like very interesting as well, because it seemed like it was all for like kids, but also for parents and people who grew up with it, and it was like a really interesting mix of people who came for that one as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So there's been a family series of basically family-oriented stories, or a children's book combined with the artists. And so we had Winnie the Pooh, we had Mo Willems. This year, I'm very sad because I'm so excited about this summer, was a new book about the civil rights era aimed at kids that we had basically commissioned, and then photographs from that era to accompany the book. And a new show at the Alliance for families about the civil rights era. So there was a whole series. We've built this series around families. Now we're going to go into a historical context around civil rights, which I obviously love. And so, you know, it's not only building shows, but it's also building a whole cadre of families that keep coming back. And you can present different kinds of things to them when they trust you as an audience.
All right, and the other one I was going to bring up, which was the infinity mirrors. And so that was an experience in itself. I haven't seen a line like that at the High, or even if for anything at the Woodruff Arts Center, for that matter. How did that even happen?
It was like a rock show being on campus for 4 months.
It really was.
It was amazing. People camping out overnight to get tickets and all kinds of stuff. So Kusama, Yayoi Kusama, you know, is a early 92, I think, year old Japanese artist. She has really become super prominent. That show was only traveling to a very small number of American outlets. Rand Suffolk, who heads the High, worked very hard to get that exhibit because he really felt like that it would be across all kinds of people, and that's exactly what it was. I think what was so cool about that show wasn't just the volume, but you'd be there on a daily basis and you'd see everybody. I mean, every kind of person was transfixed by it because it was cool and it was super interesting if you're an arty person, and it was photographable. So if you just wanted a cool selfie for your profile, you could do that. And it was really dynamic and fun. And I also think for me, it was cool. I have 2 small kids, and their interaction with it was really interesting for young people because it's so visual and it felt so interactive being in those rooms. It was really a fun experience, but it was intense because it was a volume of people every day excited about coming.
Yeah, and that's been like interesting. Like it's been like the entire High, the Woodruff Arts Center, everything has just been it seems like it's been clicking on all cylinders. And now we get to a point where for everyone, not across just like the arts, but everyone, things have stopped in the last like 90 days. So how has that been for your organization?
Well, I think you got to understand something that's unique about Atlanta, and that is Atlanta and Georgia generally doesn't support from the public sector the arts very much. You don't have a lot of grants. You have a little bit comes out of Fulton County, a little bit comes out of the city. But really, in a lot of geographies, 20% of your budget would be coming from public sources. In Atlanta and Georgia, it may be less than 1 or 2%. So because of that, we've gotten very good at earning money. All arts organizations in Atlanta are good at earned revenue. And to your point, we have basically no earned revenue right now. And so it is a huge burden. And I think it's also a burden because we don't know in art, if you just think about arts as an industry, they're about gathering people, right? People sitting in seats, people being in the same room together and experiencing something. We're trying to understand how comfortable people are going to be coming back and how quickly. And so everybody's gone virtual. Everybody's doing really cool stuff online, whether it's the Twitch channel from Dad's Garage or the virtual stage from the Atlanta Symphony. I mean, everybody's got cool stuff that they're doing. But at the end of the day, our business models have been built around earned revenue, and that earned revenue has been about gathering people. So it really is a moment in which we don't know exactly what it's going to mean for us. It could go on longer for us than for some other industries.
Right. And so in that case, have you guys had anything that's like pushed or canceled altogether for projects outside of the civil rights when you talked about, or is there like you're just kind of wait and see?
So a lot of it is wait and see. So we basically postponed as far as canceled, but the Alliance basically canceled the rest of their season starting March 13th. So there were 2 shows left in the season that had not even premiered. We hope that those will be produced at some point, but they might not, or they might be produced elsewhere instead of at the Alliance. There was a special exhibition over the summer that actually was about inclusive design. So it was a family show, but it was about how to use inclusive design to do art, and also talking about accessibility issues. That show probably will not happen. It probably just won't come. It was from Dallas. It was going to come to the High. It probably won't happen. So there are some things that have been basically canceled that probably won't end up occurring. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that's postponed that basically will occur at some point in the fall or next spring.
Okay. And so also in the case of all of your organizations, are they currently seeking donations, or they're just kind of waiting to see what's happening?
So the good news for kind of arts in general is that the Paycheck Protection Program and some of the federal legislation did include arts and nonprofits. The bad news is we are too big as an organization to get those forgivable loans. Just the way that we're organized, we're too big. So we're standing on our own resources, and we are asking for donations. We also have churned some of our efforts into direct COVID relief. So for instance, the costume shop at the Alliance has been making medical gowns and medical masks for Emory Healthcare. So we have done some of those types of things. And also we, obviously because of what we've done, we've been able to make some tough choices. For instance, the ASO, the musicians took a pay cut through June in order to try to help sustain the organization. We've had a limited number of furloughs. So we've had to make some of those moves in order to lower our costs while we wait for things to get going again.
Right. And in the case of your organization right now, since you're managing so many, are you guys thinking 24 months out or 12 months out, or is this just like, we need to kind of just take it day by day?
We have to take it day by day because they're very different, right? I mean, how people feel about coming back to the High and how you might imagine social distancing at the High is very different than imagining it at Symphony Hall or, at the Coca-Cola stage at the Alliance. So we're taking it step by step. The good news is as things open, every time something reopens, you get a little more data. And the data that you want to get is how do you manage it? So how does a restaurant manager, how does an amusement park manage it? And then also, what do patrons feel? Are patrons comfortable yet or not? And what will help them be comfortable, if anything? Do they want hand sanitizer stations? Do they want to know that you're temperature checking employees? I mean, what is it that's gonna really help people to feel as if they're safe? And so we're trying to gather that information and understand, how we can reopen, when will be the right time. And then obviously, we feel a special burden because we are gathering people together. We want to make sure that it is safe because we don't want to be the unintentional cause of the spread of the COVID.
Right. And in terms of being an arts organization, since you guys are the biggest in the state in particular, has any other organizations come to you for either guidance or help with anything?
So we're part of a couple of different kind of consortiums. So we're part of a national consortium, actually. So we've been trading weekly a lot of data with other big arts institutions across the country, sharing tips, sharing best practices, sharing ideas. And then locally, there's a consortium of theaters. There's a consortium of museums. There's also a consortium of sort of all the largest attractions, so Botanical Garden and Center for Civil and Human Rights, History Center, us, again, to try to share data, try to share thinking and best practices. So there's been a lot of conversation. The arts, the arts organizations generally are very collaborative and very open to sharing documents and ideas and thoughts, especially in a time like this. So we've been trying to work together to understand what everybody is thinking and to try to help each other think through the issues. That's a good thing about the arts, is that we're pretty open with each other.
Okay, good, good. And so just in closing, is there anything you want people to know about what you guys are doing or how they can help with any of the organizations that the Woodruff is a part of?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I think one, the other piece of this that's super important to understand is that Atlanta has also, part of our success has been the fact that Atlanta has been able to keep artists here. It used to be that artists got to about 25 or 30 and they left to go make their name someplace else. They might come back, they might not. The last decade or so, we've had a lot of artists stay through that part of their career, and it's been fantastic. You have 35-year-old working artists in Atlanta who are based here, like Fahamu, for instance. Fahamu, 20 years ago would probably have left, but now he can stay. He can be based here. Or Fabian, or I could go on and on. We need to make sure as a community that we support those artists. They're the ones that are going to be very impacted by this, both personally, but also because they're small businesses, and small businesses are going to be impacted. So one is, I hope everybody understands that if you're helping an artist, either by donating them directly or purchasing one of their artworks or whatever, you're actually helping to keep them here, which helps every arts organization in town. I think the other is, in this moment, a lot of content is coming from us for free. We're helping to educate folks' kids as they do virtual school. We're helping to stream things. And I would hope that people would think a little bit about, instead of just taking that for free, obviously everybody's hurting economically, but even a $5 donation for the fact that you watched a live stream, or a $10 donation because you used the materials we produce for your kids, can be super meaningful, because it helps us understand that you value it, right? Because you've said, hey, I'm using this and it's important to me. And so I think for anybody, not just for us, but if you find yourself turning to an arts organization that's helping you get through this, even a small donation will signal to them that what they're doing is valuable.
I fully agree on that one. All right. Oh, and if people want to donate, how can they donate?
Sure. So you can go to the Woodruff Arts Center website, or you can go to any of the particular websites, the Alliance Theater, the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, or the High Museum. And all of them have ways for you to donate, or even to become members, season ticket subscribers, all of those things, in order to show that that you're with us through this period.
Okay. And thank you so much, Doug, for doing this and taking time out today. I know it's definitely busy on you and you have a lot of stuff going on, but I fully appreciate you taking some time out to talk to me today.
It's my pleasure. And I can't wait till we can see each other in person.
Yeah, it's definitely going to happen. So thank you so much.
Take care.
All right. 1 second. And one other thing. Thank you guys. If you have checked out this video, if you like what you saw, please make sure you subscribe to my newsletter at iamkingwilliams.substack.com, or you can subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/iamkingwilliams. Once again, thank you, Doug Shipman, for just taking time out to talk about the Woodruff Arts Center and all the organizations that they represent today. If you guys have someone else you want to talk to, please let me know. Please, you can email me or message me on my all social media channels at I Am King Williams. And once again, thank you guys for checking this out.